For a brief moment in history, no one on earth could die. One man did that. When Zeus sent death to collect Sisyphus, the king of Corinth did something no mortal had ever done. He tricked Thanatos into demonstrating his own chains. Then he locked them shut, and with death imprisoned, the world changed. Soldiers fell in battle and stood back up. The old and the dying could find no release. The god of war himself had to intervene. But here's where the story takes its cruelest turn. Sisyphus would cheat death again. You have heard this story before. A man pushing a boulder up a hill for eternity. You were told he deserved it, that he was arrogant, that the gods punished him for his hubris. But no one ever tells you what he actually did. Sisyphus was the king of Ephyra, the ancient name for Corinth. He was married to Merope, one of the 7 Pleiades. If you look at the night sky, you can see them. A cluster of 7 stars. 6 shine bright. 1 is faint. That is Merope. The ancient Greeks said she dimmed her light out of shame, because she was the only Pleiad who married a mortal instead of a god. She chose Sisyphus, the only mortal man in Greek mythology married to a star, and by every account, the craftiest human alive. His grandson was Bellerophon, the hero who would one day tame Pegasus. Cunning ran in the blood. Now here is what the textbooks leave out. Zeus abducted a young woman named Aegina, the daughter of Asopus, the river god. Asopus searched everywhere for his missing child. He went from city to city, begging for information. Every god on Olympus knew where she was. Every single one stayed silent, except Sisyphus. He struck a deal. He told Asopus who took his daughter. In exchange, Asopus created a permanent spring on the Corinthian Acropolis. A father got answers, a city got water, and Sisyphus named Zeus as the kidnapper. A mortal exposed a god's crime to a grieving father. That was his sin, not arrogance, not hubris. He told the truth to a parent looking for his child. Zeus did not seek justice. He wanted silence. He sent death himself to collect Sisyphus. But Sisyphus was not a man who went quietly. When death arrived in Corinth, he expected a terrified mortal begging for mercy. Instead, he found Sisyphus waiting, calm, composed. Thanatos, death personified, not a metaphor, not a symbol. The Greeks believed he was an actual being who came to collect your soul. No mortal had ever resisted him. Sisyphus did not run. He did not fight. He did something far more dangerous. He talked. He turned the encounter into a conversation, complimented the craftsmanship of the chains Thanatos carried, asked how they worked exactly, the mechanism, the technique. Could he demonstrate? Thanatos, who had never failed to claim his soul, saw no threat in a mortal's curiosity. He placed the chains on himself to show how they locked. Sisyphus locked them shut. Death was in chains. A mortal had imprisoned the one force no living thing had ever escaped. Think about that for a moment. And then the world broke. No one on earth could die. Soldiers fell in battle and stood back up. The terminally ill were trapped in their suffering. The elderly who longed for rest could not find it. The dying begged for an end that would not come. The entire natural order of existence had been shattered by one man in one city. The god of war himself had to intervene. Ares marched to Corinth because warfare had lost its meaning. What is the point of a sword if it cannot kill? What is the purpose of a battle if both sides walk away? He freed Thanatos, and he dragged Sisyphus straight to death. Sisyphus died. His soul descended to the underworld. By every law of gods and men, his story was over. But Sisyphus had planned for this too. Before his death, he gave his wife Merope one very specific instruction. Do not bury me. Do not pour the libations. Do not perform a single funeral rite. This was not cruelty. It was strategy. In Greek religion, failing to honor the dead was the gravest possible insult. Sisyphus was counting on that. Would he arrive before? Persephone, queen of the dead, he did not beg. He complained. My own wife has disgraced me. She left my body unburied. No offerings, no coin for the ferryman, no rites of any kind. He asked for one thing. Let me return to the living world. Just long enough to punish her for the dishonor. Persephone was moved. She agreed. Sisyphus walked back into the sunlight of Corinth. He breathed the air of the living world once more. and he had absolutely no intention of returning. He lived out the rest of his natural life, growing old in the city he had built. Merope was not negligent. She was his co-conspirator. The star who chose a mortal had also chosen to help him cheat the underworld. Together they pulled off the greatest inside job in mythology. Eventually, Hermes was sent to drag Sisyphus back to the underworld by force. The messenger god did not negotiate. He did not ask. He simply took him. Sisyphus had defeated death twice. He had outsmarted Zeus, Thanatos, and Persephone. No mortal in the history of Greek mythology had ever done this. Not Heracles, not Achilles, not Odysseus. And that was exactly the problem. The gods needed a punishment that even the cleverest mind in history could not escape. They condemned him to Tartarus, the deepest pit of the underworld, reserved for those who had offended the gods themselves. His task was simple: push an immense boulder up a steep hill. Every time it nears the summit, it rolls back down to the plain below. Begin again. Forever. Homer describes it in the Odyssey. Odysseus himself witnesses Sisyphus in Tartarus, straining with hands and feet, sweat pouring down his limbs, dust rising from his head, an endless labor with no purpose and no end. But here is where the story takes its cruelest turn. This punishment was not random. It was designed specifically for his mind. Sisyphus was the cleverest mortal who ever lived. Every problem he had ever faced, he had solved with cunning. So the gods gave him the one task that cunning could not solve. No trick would move the boulder to the top. No deal could be struck with a stone. No one to outsmart. No scheme to devise. Just rock and hill in silence. Forever. The punishment was never the labor. It was the emptiness. An infinite mind given infinite nothing. And there is one more secret buried in this story. Later traditions claim that Sisyphus seduced Anticlea before her marriage to Laertes. Anticlea's father was Autolycus, the greatest thief in Greece, grandson of Hermes. Sisyphus had caught him stealing cattle by marking the hooves. As restitution, or perhaps revenge, he took Autolycus's daughter. If this tradition is true, it changes everything. Because Anticlea's son was Odysseus, Greek literature's greatest trickster, the man who outwitted the Cyclops, devised the Trojan horse, and spent 10 years scheming his way home. He may have inherited that cunning not from the gods, but from the most punished man in the underworld. The gods called it justice. But Sisyphus was punished because he told a father where his daughter was, because he refused to die when the powerful told him to die, because he was smarter than the beings who ruled him. The boulder was never about the crime. It was about the threat. A mortal who could outthink a god. That was the one thing Olympus could not allow. Think about that for a moment. The next time someone tells you Sisyphus deserved his fate, ask them what his crime actually was.